Hi guys, welcome back to CQ Gaming. Today is the first in our series of video tutorials, painting tutorial videos. We're going to be making scenery, painting. Today, as you saw in the thumbnail, we're going to be painting power swords and how to wet blend. But before we do all that, I'm going to show you how to make a wet palette, what household materials you could use to make one, which is going to make life much easier for you. And what I do in my techniques to do it. This is for beginners, so it's really easy to follow along. So yeah, let's pick a model, preferably one with a sword. Oh, yeah. Remember this? I bet nobody's opened theirs yet. The Autark. And of course the Indomitus Blade Guard Captain, because why wouldn't we do him? He's got a good sword. Let's do it. Hi guys, okay, so the first thing you're going to need is, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, is this, the Citadel Midland Tufts. So what you want to do is get rid of that, and you're going to use this box as the base for your wet palette. So if you come with me to my kitchen, I will show you how to make it. Okay, so dead easy. What you need to do is get some kitchen roll, standard kitchen roll, fold it in half, twice over, just so it fits in the now soon to be wet palette. Cut it if you want, just so it's not hanging over the edges, but ideally it needs to just fit into this tray with a bit of consistencies to it, not just like 1 or 2 layers, about 3 or 4 should do. With the kitchen roll, the next thing you want to get is some, now this is important, it needs to be grease proof baking paper. This stuff, so it has to be grease proof. The reason why is because when you're wet blending, water's obviously very thin compared to your paint, and if you do it on the standard palettes that like GW sell, it just dries within seconds, whereas on a wet palette, on something grease proof, this stuff doesn't absorb moisture, so it stays wetter for longer, sometimes a couple of days. So that's really what you need. So you just cut a sheet of this and put it over the top of the kitchen roll. Okay, so there we go, there's the greaseproof paper over the top of the kitchen roll, and the next thing you need to do is wet the palette. So it's really important you don't put too much water on, just enough that the kitchen roll underneath is slightly damp, but not so that it's running over the top of the paper on the top. Now, because we're glazing today, a lot of the paint is going to be mixed with a lot of water, so it doesn't really matter that the top of this paper is quite wet, because the paint needs to be really thinned down all the time consistently anyway. We're not going to be using standard paint, we're going to be glazing all the time, so you'll see why. Also, I love this brush. This is the Element Games Regiment brush, which is the best brush I've ever used for glazing. It's really good. It's my precious. Alright guys, so here's the wet palette. I'm going to show you exactly what kind of consistency you need to blend the colour with glazing. So, get some of your paint. We're using rust grey here as the next highlight. So just get some on your palette there. And what you want to do is get a drop of water and mix that in there until it is a glaze-like consistency. So a glaze consistency, when you drag the paint, it should look watery. So not too thick, but not too watery either. So I've added a little bit more to that. There you go. Now you've got a little bit of that watery paint on your brush there. Next thing what you want to do is get a little bit of tissue paper. So here, and just dab your brush onto there, and you'll see that some of it will run off onto the kitchen roll. It's really important you don't have too much excess paint on there, because it'll pool onto the model just like a wash does, and when that dries it's just going to look harsh. You'll see the lines, it won't blend in smoothly. So just make sure you have just enough on that the paint creates a wet it's kind of wetting the surface of the model rather than pooling the paint on there. Okay guys, so yes, together we're going to be doing the power sword for the Blade Guard veteran captain, which is this sword here. So I've taken that off him for now, as that's the only thing we're going to be painting, and we'll see him later, probably next year when I get around to painting him. And we'll do the autoc, just to give you guys an idea of how you blend different shades of colour together. So the first thing you're going to do, which is really important, is you need to pick a colour for the sword that is going with the colour scheme of the army that you've made. So green goes very well with purple. That's the main reason I chose this, and I'll show you which colours that I used to do that. So the first ever model I painted using this technique was this Space Marine Sergeant with a power sword, Dark Angels. The colours that I used for this, basically I said, right, I want it to be different shades of grey, and I looked in my paint pot what shades I had, and there were Rust Grey, Thunderhawk Blue, Celestial Grey, and Ultron Grey. And all we're going to do is blend these colours together on the Blade Guard Veterans Power Sword. So I'll walk you guys through exactly step by step how we do this, coming up next. Okay guys, so the first thing you're going to need to do is undercoat the entire sword in Thunderhawk Blue and let that dry. Okay guys, so with your Thunderhawk Blue base coat on, you then need to get some Rust Grey, so that's the next shade up from that colour. Add some water, make sure this is a glaze consistency. There we go, it's quite watery there. You can tell it's watery because when we put it to the brush, it absorbs into the paper like so. So make sure you get all that excess off there, and it's just that little bit of paint that you want on the brush. Okay. Here we have the sword. So what you want to do, is take your glaze. So you need to have a light area, dark area, light area, dark area, and the other side needs to be opposite to that, which I'll show you as we go. So if we start with the top bit being the lightest area, you want to pull the glaze up to the tip of the blade. Now you can see what I mean by pooling there. See where the paint is the most prominent? That is where it's pooling slightly. Now at the tip of the sword, that's not a problem because that's kind of where the colour needs to be strongest anyway. So as that dries, it's going to fade in, and you're going to have to add a couple of layers over the top. The thinner the paint is, the more layers you're going to have to add till that colour gradually comes into play. But you'll see what I mean as I add more and more layers, how that's going to look. Okay, so we're going to keep doing that while that's drying. So light, dark, remember. So the next part, you're going to pull the glaze just towards here, and then you're going to pull it up so that it meets in the middle, like so, and just let that dry. So same here, meet in the middle, down, meet in the middle, and here also, so down and meet in the middle, just like that, and just let that dry. Just remember to get that excess off the brush. When you dip the tip in, it shouldn't pool a lot, it should just be a little bit. So once it's down to that level, then you can start adding to those layers. So that's quite pooled quite a bit there, so we had a bit too much on the brush. Just adding a couple more layers on here. Just building up that transition. You can gradually see as it's drying the shades are changing gradually. just as an example here, you can see how much paint you should be like brushing on. So you can see there's almost not much colour to it. You're just almost wetting the surface, and the paint gathers at the highest point where you finish your stroke. So it's going to shade it deeper and deeper, if you know what I mean. So you can see that the colour's starting to separate from the other shade, but you want to be waiting for it to dry before fully, because see it's still a bit wet there. Don't go over it again until it's fully dry, because otherwise you'll spread that glaze. That's when you'll start getting lines. Alright, so we're going over this one final time to really bring out that shade. This will kind of be the last go with this colour. Alright, so you can see that first go over is now dry. You've got dark, light, dark, light, dark, and then light, dark, light, dark, light. So they need to opposite each other. This creates the effect of light bouncing off steel, metal, whatever. Yeah, so just make sure you've got no patchy areas. If there are, just go over it with the glaze again. Make sure it's completely filled. We can do the tidying up later, but right now we're just getting those colours in, so don't worry too much about making a mess. Alright guys, next you want to get some Abaddon black and go back to your Thunderhawk blue, and you're going to do a little bit of a mix with these two to glaze into the darker areas. Alright guys, so get your Thunderhawk blue, bunch of it onto your palette there, and you're going to take some Abaddon black, not too much, and just mix that together. If it's looking too black, then you need to put some more blue in. Okay, so you can see where it's wet is where I've met it in the middle again, so swiping down, then up, down, then up, making sure that dark bit is just in the middle of those darker areas. And apart from the top, you need to spread that to the top of the tip of the sword. Yeah, so we'll let that dry and see if it needs another pass. So it's starting to look good now, so we're going to move on to the lighter colours and start highlighting these lighter areas with some Celestra Grey. Alright, so a couple of passes with the Celestra Grey, and that's put in the lines where we want them to be for the next transition, which we need to blend in at the end. These ones will look quite harsh because going from Rust Grey to Celestra Grey is quite a gap in colour, so you can easily see where it changes rather than it should be blending in smoothly together, which we'll do next. Alright, so with a mix of Rust Grey and Celestra Grey mixed together on the palette, you want to get the line where you can see the white, like the harsh line where the white is basically, you want to just lightly drag the paint over that line, just so you can blend it together with that mix. Alright guys, next you're going to get Rust Grey, which was the second highlight we did from the undercoat, and you're going to drag the glaze up towards the brightest point of the Celestra Grey, just to even out those lines in between, and it also fixes any mistakes that were there in the beginning. If the lines end up too harsh where your Rust Grey is, and you notice that you have like a solid line between that and the Thunderhawk blue, you can just again get a mix of Rust Grey, Thunderhawk blue, and just lightly glaze over that line as well. So it's just all about the two colours you've used, putting them together to create one that goes in between that blends everything nicely together. You just got to keep doing that until everything's nice and smooth. And then we move on to the last colour, which is Ulthuan Grey. Alright, so you're starting to get the idea. We've blended those lines in a little bit better, so it's starting to look like starting to look a lot smoother. So now we're going to go on to just the final bit. You can continue to blend those lines in a bit more until you get it as smooth as you can. I mean, I'm certainly not going to leave this like this. I'll keep blending it in, because if you look at the previous one I did, those lines are really smooth compared to this. I mean, it's not far off, but you get the kind of idea of what to do. Okay, lastly, we're going to get some Ulth1 Grey. You're not going to wet this down, because this is going to be an edge highlight. And if you wet it, it might spread. So let's get a little bit on your brush, the edge of the sword. Just lightly brush the highlights on. Just going to move over here so I can see what I'm doing. Yeah, so the edge of the sword, just start getting that edge highlight there. That's it. And do that all along the edge of the sword and along the middle bit here. And there you go, guys. So I've just dragged this side of the brush just in a kind of motion down the middle bit of the blade, just to create that final kind of shine there. Basically, that's all you do. The awesome news is that you have to do it all over again on the other side. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Like I say, it's always a battle just to keep blending those lines in together, but you kind of get the gist of the idea as a beginner, and which I certainly am. I think it's a technique that's pretty straightforward to do. It's a bit messy, but you know, a bit of tidying up and you get there. But yeah, pretty pleased with that. And there he is. Start of something special. I'll get him done one day. Guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you found it helpful. It's the first video that I've ever made. Definitely the first any kind of tutorial that I've ever made. So I hope you found it useful. I hope it made you laugh. I certainly had a lot of fun filming it, and I'm going to be doing a lot more of these, so stay tuned. Keep an eye on CQ Gaming, because we're going to be bringing more videos like this to you. So Dean's going to be showing you how to make your own terrain for your battlefields, household materials again. Steve is showing us how to paint Necrons, I believe. I'm not sure what Anthony's doing yet, but I'm sure it'll be good. But yeah, thank you very much. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. I'm new to the hobby after like 10 years out, so these are a lot of techniques that I've learned recently, and I'm still learning. So, but yes, if you like the video, please give it a like, subscribe. Same goes with any content that you watch. If you enjoy it, just give them a like, give them a subscribe. It really helps the channels out. And we'll have more stuff coming for you soon. Thank you very much, and take care.